The hum of the refrigerator was a constant in our kitchen, a sound I'd always found comforting. Tonight, though, it seemed to amplify the silence, the hollow echo in a house that once brimmed with laughter. Sarah was out. A girls' night, she'd called it. They'd become frequent lately, these outings. Not that I minded her having time with her friends. It was important, I knew, for her to have that connection, that space outside of us. But something had shifted, a subtle change in the atmosphere of our home, a quiet dissonance that tugged at the edges of my contentment. It wasn't a single event, no dramatic argument or sudden revelation. It was more like a slow leak, a gradual deflation of the joy that had always permeated our relationship. Sarah's smiles, once freely given, now seemed reserved, her laughter echoing in the other room, fading when I entered. Conversations felt stilted, punctuated by awkward silences that stretched on a beat too long. I tried to bridge the gap, asking about her day, suggesting a movie night, but the warmth I'd once felt radiating from her had cooled, leaving a chill in its wake. I chalked it up to stress. We'd both been working long hours, the pressures of our careers seeping into our personal lives. It was understandable, I reasoned, that she might need some time to unwind, to reconnect with her friends. But the feeling persisted, a nagging unease that settled in the pit of my stomach, a sense of being on the outside looking in. I'd catch her whispering on the phone, her voice dropping to a low murmur when I entered the room. Shared jokes with her friends, snippets of conversations that ended abruptly when I approached. It was like being in a play where everyone else knew their lines but me. Tonight, the quiet felt particularly oppressive. I wandered through the house, a sense of restlessness growing within me. I picked up a framed photo of us from our last vacation, a picture filled with sunshine and smiles. We looked so happy then, so connected. I traced the outline of her face with my finger, trying to recapture the feeling of that moment, the certainty of our love. But the image felt distant, a memory from a life I no longer recognized. I put the photo down, a heavy sigh escaping my lips. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the foundation of our life together was cracking beneath my feet. The lateness of the hour began to prickle at my nerves. Sarah had said it was just a casual get-together, a chance to catch up with Lisa and a few other friends. But the clock on the microwave ticked past midnight, and there was still no sign of her. I tried to distract myself, flipping through channels on the television, but the flickering images only amplified the growing unease within me. I found myself listening for the sound of her car in the driveway, each passing minute stretching into an eternity. I replayed the last few weeks in my mind, searching for a clue, a missed signal, anything that might explain the distance that had grown between us. There were the hushed phone calls, of course, the way she'd quickly changed the subject when I entered the room, and the stolen glances with Lisa, a shared knowingness that excluded me. It wasn't just Sarah, though. The entire dynamic of our social circle had subtly shifted. Tom, my best man, had become strangely aloof, his once easygoing demeanor replaced by a forced politeness. Even Greg, our jovial neighbor, seemed to avoid my gaze, his boisterous laughter now reserved for conversations I wasn't a part of. It was as if an invisible wall had been erected around me, separating me from the people I trusted most. I felt like a fool, oblivious to some unspoken truth, blind to the undercurrents swirling beneath the surface of our seemingly idyllic lives. The thought flickered through my mind, a dark suspicion I tried to suppress, a fear that gnawed at my sense of security. Could it be them? All of them? The idea felt absurd, preposterous. These were our friends, people we'd shared holidays with, confided in, trusted with the intimate details of our lives. The thought of them betraying me, of Sarah with them, it was too much to bear. Yet, the pieces seemed to fit, the subtle cues, the whispered conversations, the shared laughter that faded when I approached. The more I tried to push the thought away, the more it clung to me, a cold, hard knot of dread in my stomach. I paced the living room, my reflection in the darkened window, a stranger staring back at me. I felt adrift, lost in a sea of uncertainty, the familiar landmarks of my life slowly disappearing beneath the waves. The sound of the garage door finally jolted me back to reality. I stood frozen, listening to the soft click of the car door, the quiet footsteps approaching the house. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that tonight, everything was about to change. The front door creaked open, and Sarah slipped into the house, her movements a little too deliberate, her smile a little too bright. "Sorry I'm late," she whispered, her voice laced with a nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. "We lost track of time." I simply nodded, my gaze fixed on the small clutch she held tightly in her hand. It was a new bag, one I hadn't seen before. A gift, perhaps? From whom? "You look tired," she said, her eyes flitting away from mine. "Long day." "Something like that," I replied, my voice flat. "Why don't you head up to bed? I'll be there in a minute." She hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Okay," she said finally, turning towards the stairs. "Don't be too long." I waited until I heard the soft click of the bedroom door closing before I moved. My hands trembled as I reached for her bag, the leather cool and smooth beneath my fingertips. I hesitated for a moment, a wave of nausea washing over me. This was wrong, an invasion of privacy. But the suspicion, the gnawing doubt, was a force I couldn't ignore. I unzipped the bag, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, nestled amongst the usual assortment of feminine paraphernalia, was a small silver phone. Not her regular phone, the one she used for work and calls with her mother. This was a different phone, sleek and slim, a device I'd never seen before. My breath caught in my throat as I reached for it, my fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar buttons. The screen lit up, revealing a series of messages. Not explicit, not overtly incriminating, but coded, filled with inside jokes and veiled references that sent a shiver down my spine. "Remember the cabin?" one message read. "We should do that again sometime. Just us." "Missing you already," another said. "Can't wait for our next adventure." The names jumped out at me. Tom, Lisa, even Greg. My own friends, the people I'd welcomed into my home, shared meals with, trusted with my life. The realization hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath away. It wasn't just one person. It was all of them. A group, a secret society operating right under my nose. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. A cold, hollow ache that spread through my chest, constricting my lungs, making it difficult to breathe. I sank onto the couch, the phone slipping from my grasp. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, the familiar comforts of my life dissolving into a blur of confusion and betrayal. The people I'd loved, the people I'd trusted, had woven a web of deceit so intricate, so insidious, that I'd been completely blind to it. And Sarah, my wife, the woman I'd vowed to spend my life with, was at the center of it all. The thought was unbearable, a poison that seeped into my veins, turning my blood to ice. The initial shock gave way to a chilling calm. A strange detachment settled over me, a numbness that dulled the sharp edges of the pain. I didn't confront Sarah. I didn't rage, I didn't cry. I simply went to bed, lying beside her as she slept, the steady rhythm of her breathing a mockery of the turmoil within me. I watched her in the darkness, her face serene, her lips curved into a slight smile. Was she dreaming of them? Of their shared secrets, their illicit rendezvous? The thought twisted in my gut, a bitter taste in my mouth. The next morning, I went through the motions of our routine, the familiar rituals of breakfast and goodbye kisses feeling hollow and meaningless. I left for work, the weight of my discovery pressing down on me, a leaden cloak I couldn't shed. I couldn't concentrate, the numbers on my computer screen blurring into meaningless symbols. All I could see were their faces, their knowing smiles, their shared glances that excluded me. I began to observe them, a silent observer in my own life. I watched their interactions, their subtle cues, the way their eyes lit up when they were together. I listened to their conversations, deciphering their coded language, piecing together the fragments of their betrayal. I became a ghost in my own home, a shadow moving through the rooms, unseen, unheard. I started collecting evidence, a digital dossier of their deceit. Screenshots of messages, emails, social media posts, dates, times, locations, a meticulous record of their clandestine activities. It was a strange sort of therapy, a way to channel the rage and hurt that threatened to consume me. With each piece of information I gathered, the numbness grew, a protective shield against the overwhelming pain. I didn't know what I was going to do with this information, but I knew I couldn't let it go unpunished. They had violated my trust, shattered my world, and I wouldn't let them get away with it. A plan began to form in my mind, a seed of revenge taking root in the fertile ground of my anger. It wouldn't be a quick, impulsive act. This would be a slow burn, a carefully orchestrated dismantling of their lives, a methodical exposure of their hypocrisy and deceit. They had played a dangerous game, and now it was my turn to deal the cards. Revenge is a dish best served cold, they say, and mine would be glacial. I wouldn't confront them directly, not yet. I would chip away at their foundations, subtly undermining their carefully constructed lives, exposing the cracks in their facades. I would turn their own weapons against them, their secrets and lies becoming the instruments of their downfall. Tom, my supposed best friend, was the first to fall under my scrutiny. He was ambitious, driven by a relentless desire to climb the corporate ladder. I knew his weaknesses, his insecurities, the carefully hidden anxieties that fueled his ambition. I began to plant seeds of doubt, subtly suggesting to colleagues that he was overreaching, that his successes were more a matter of luck than skill. I hinted at opportunities that were just out of his reach, dangling the carrot of advancement while subtly undermining his confidence. Lisa, Sarah's confidant, was a different kind of challenge. She presented a flawless facade to the world, a picture of domestic bliss and social grace. But beneath the surface, I knew there were vulnerabilities, hidden insecurities that she desperately tried to conceal. I started a whisper campaign, a carefully orchestrated dissemination of rumors about her past, her carefully guarded secrets slowly seeping into the social circles she so desperately wanted to be a part of. Even Greg, our jovial neighbor, wasn't immune. He was a man of secrets, his affable demeanor masking a series of shady business dealings. I began to drop hints, seemingly innocuous comments about financial irregularities, ethical breaches, just enough to raise suspicion amongst his colleagues and clients. I watched as the seeds of doubt took root, the trust he'd so carefully cultivated slowly eroding. It was a delicate dance, a game of manipulation and subtle suggestion. I had to be careful to avoid suspicion, to maintain my own facade of normalcy. But with each small victory, with each crack in their armor, a sense of satisfaction grew within me, a cold, hard ember glowing in the ashes of my betrayal. They had underestimated me, dismissed me as a simple, trusting fool. They had no idea of the depths of my anger, the meticulousness of my plan. They were about to learn that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous. The summer stretched on, a season of stifling heat and simmering resentment. I continued to play my role, the oblivious husband, the trusting friend. I smiled, I laughed, I participated in their social gatherings, all the while observing, calculating, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then the opportunity presented itself. A long weekend was approaching, a holiday that traditionally brought our group together for a getaway at a lakeside cabin. It was the perfect setting, a secluded location where I could manipulate the environment, control the narrative, and expose their deceit. I suggested the trip, feigning enthusiasm, masking my true intentions behind a facade of camaraderie. They readily agreed, their eagerness tinged with a hint of nervousness that I found both satisfying and disturbing. The days leading up to the trip were a blur of activity. I made the arrangements, booked the cabin, organized the supplies, all the while meticulously planning my next move. I packed my bags, carefully selecting items that would play a crucial role in my scheme. A hidden camera disguised as a pen, a voice recorder tucked away in my toiletry bag, and a series of seemingly innocuous documents, emails, and photographs, each one a carefully chosen weapon in my arsenal of revenge. The drive to the cabin was tense, the air thick with unspoken anxieties. I could sense their unease, their forced laughter failing to mask the underlying tension. They were like animals caught in a trap, their instincts screaming at them to flee, but their desire to maintain the facade of normalcy keeping them in place. I watched them in the rearview mirror, their faces etched with a mixture of anticipation and dread. They had no idea what was coming, the storm that was about to break over their heads. As we arrived at the cabin, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The familiar scent of pine needles and lake water, once a source of comfort and joy, now carried a sinister undertone. The laughter of my friends, once a welcome sound, now grated on my nerves, a constant reminder of their betrayal. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the task ahead. This was it. The time had come to put my plan into action. The weekend had begun, and with it, the countdown to their downfall. The cabin was a rustic, two-story affair, with a wide porch overlooking the lake. It was a place filled with memories, laughter, and shared experiences. Now, it felt like a stage set for a tragedy, the familiar surroundings imbued with a sense of impending doom. I watched as my friends settled in, their forced gaiety a thin veneer over the growing tension. Sarah, especially, seemed on edge, her eyes darting nervously around the room, her smile strained. The first day unfolded with an uneasy normalcy. We swam in the lake, played cards, shared meals. But beneath the surface, the currents of deceit were swirling, threatening to pull us all under. I bided my time, observing their interactions, waiting for the right moment to strike. That evening, after a dinner fueled by nervous energy and forced conversation, I decided to make my move. We were gathered around the fireplace, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Greg, emboldened by a few drinks, was holding court, boasting about his latest business venture. I listened patiently, a plan forming in my mind. "That's quite an ambitious project, Greg," I said casually. "I'm sure it requires a significant investment." Greg puffed up his chest, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Of course, Mark. But the returns will be substantial. Trust me, this is a game changer." "Indeed," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "Speaking of investments, I happened to come across an interesting article the other day. It seems there's been some scrutiny of companies involved in—" I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Well, let's just say questionable environmental practices." Greg's face paled, his bravado evaporating like morning mist. "What are you implying, Mark?" he stammered, his voice laced with a hint of panic. "Nothing really," I said innocently. "Just making conversation." But it did get me thinking about the importance of due diligence, especially when it comes to— I paused again, my eyes fixed on Greg's increasingly agitated face. Sustainable business practices. The seed was planted. Doubt, like an insidious weed, began to take root in the minds of the others. They exchanged uneasy glances, their trust in Greg, already fragile, crumbling under the weight of my carefully chosen words. The atmosphere in the room shifted, the convivial mood replaced by a palpable tension. I watched as the first cracks appeared in their carefully constructed facade, a sense of satisfaction growing within me. The game was afoot and I was in control. The following day, the tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Greg, his usual boisterous self now subdued and withdrawn, spent most of the morning on his phone, making frantic calls, trying to contain the damage I had inflicted. The others, their trust in him shaken, watched him with a mixture of suspicion and apprehension. The seeds of doubt I had sown were bearing fruit, their carefully constructed world beginning to unravel. I continued to play my role, the concerned friend, offering platitudes and feigning ignorance. But behind the mask of concern, I was relishing their discomfort, the slow burn of their collective anxiety. I knew this was just the beginning. I had more plans in store, more carefully orchestrated scenarios designed to expose their hypocrisy and shatter their illusions. That afternoon, I engineered a seemingly innocuous conversation about social issues, steering the discussion towards topics I knew would reveal their hidden prejudices and biases. I watched as they stumbled over their words, their carefully crafted personas slipping, their true colors bleeding through. Lisa, the champion of progressive values, revealed a surprising intolerance towards those less fortunate than herself. Tom, the self-proclaimed feminist, expressed views that were shockingly misogynistic. Even Sarah, my own wife, surprised me with her casual indifference to the struggles of others. Their hypocrisy was laid bare, their carefully constructed facades crumbling under the weight of their own words. They looked at each other with a mixture of shame and disbelief, their shared secrets no longer a source of bonding but a source of division. The bonds of trust that had held them together were strained to the breaking point, their carefully cultivated friendships teetering on the brink of collapse. I watched it all unfold, a silent observer, a puppet master pulling the strings. The sense of control was intoxicating, the power to manipulate and expose their vulnerabilities a heady drug. I was no longer the victim, the betrayed husband. I was the architect of their downfall, the orchestrator of their destruction. And as the weekend progressed, I knew that the worst was yet to come. The final act of my revenge was still to be played out, and it would be the most devastating of all. The air in the cabin crackled with a tension so thick it was almost palpable. The veneer of civility had worn thin, replaced by a raw, simmering animosity. They moved around each other like wary animals, their eyes darting with suspicion, their voices tight with suppressed anger. The once jovial atmosphere had been replaced by a suffocating silence, punctuated only by the crackling of the fire and the distant call of a loon. I knew it was time. The moment had arrived to confront Sarah, to expose her betrayal, to lay bare the depths of her deceit. I found her on the porch, staring out at the darkening lake, her shoulders slumped, her face etched with a mixture of guilt and defiance. I approached her slowly, my footsteps silent on the wooden planks. "Sarah?" I said softly, my voice devoid of anger, filled only with a chilling calm. She turned to face me, her eyes wide with apprehension. "We need to talk." I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse, didn't plead. I simply laid out the facts, the evidence I had gathered, the details of her infidelity with Tom, Lisa, and Greg. I recounted their secret meetings, their coded messages, their shared experiences that excluded me. I spoke with a clinical precision, stripping away the romantic pretense, reducing their affair to a series of cold, hard facts. Sarah listened in stunned silence, her face pale, her lips trembling. She tried to speak, to offer excuses, to deny, but the words caught in her throat. The truth was undeniable, the evidence irrefutable. She had been caught, exposed, her carefully constructed world shattered into a million pieces. I watched as the realization of her betrayal sank in, the shame and guilt washing over her like a tidal wave. There were no tears, no pleas for forgiveness, just a hollow silence, a gaping chasm of regret. I had stripped her bare, exposed her deepest secrets, and in doing so, I had taken away her power. I didn't gloat, didn't offer any pronouncements of judgment. I simply turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone on the porch, the weight of her betrayal crushing her spirit. The final act of my revenge was complete. I had destroyed their trust, shattered their friendships, and exposed their hypocrisy. They were left to face the consequences of their actions, the wreckage of their lives a testament to the devastating power of betrayal. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The fragile peace that had held the group together shattered completely. Accusations flew like daggers, friendships dissolved into bitter recriminations, and long-buried resentments bubbled to the surface. The cabin, once a sanctuary of shared laughter and camaraderie, became a battleground of betrayal and deceit. Greg, his reputation in tatters, turned on Tom, accusing him of undermining his business dealings. Lisa, her carefully cultivated image tarnished, lashed out at Sarah, blaming her for the collapse of their social circle. Sarah, overwhelmed by guilt and shame, retreated into a shell of silence, unable to face the consequences of her actions. The once cohesive group fractured into a collection of isolated individuals, each consumed by their own pain and resentment. The bonds of trust that had held them together were severed, replaced by a toxic brew of suspicion and animosity. They packed their bags in a tense silence, their departure marked by a palpable sense of relief. I watched them leave, a silent observer, a ghost in the wreckage of their lives. There was no satisfaction in their downfall, no sense of triumph. Only a profound sadness, a deep ache for the friendships that had been lost, the trust that had been betrayed. The cabin, now empty and silent, felt like a tomb, a monument to the fragility of human relationships. I wandered through the rooms, the echoes of their laughter and conversations a haunting reminder of what had been. The remnants of their weekend lay scattered about, a forgotten book, a half-empty wine glass, a discarded board game, the detritus of a life that had been irrevocably shattered. I spent the rest of the day cleaning up, erasing the traces of their presence, trying to restore some semblance of order to the chaos they had left behind. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the lake, I sat on the porch, the silence broken only by the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. The weekend was over, the revenge complete. But the pain lingered, a dull ache in my heart, a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my world. I didn't stay at the cabin. The silence was too oppressive, the memories too painful. I packed my own bags, leaving behind the remnants of their shattered lives, and drove back to the city. The familiar streets felt alien, the bustling crowds a stark contrast to the isolation of the cabin. I felt like a stranger in my own life, adrift in a sea of unfamiliar emotions. The following days were a blur. I went through the motions of my work, the routine providing a semblance of normalcy in a world that had been turned upside down. But the pain was always there, a constant undercurrent beneath the surface of my daily life. I couldn't escape the memories, the images of their betrayal flashing through my mind at unexpected moments. I didn't contact them, didn't answer their calls or respond to their messages. I had no desire to speak to them, to hear their excuses or justifications. The damage was done, the trust irrevocably broken. There was nothing left to say. I began to make plans. I put the house on the market, the thought of staying there, surrounded by the ghosts of their betrayal, unbearable. I started looking for a new job, a fresh start in a new city, far away from the memories that haunted me. The process was slow, each step a painful reminder of the life I had lost. But with each passing day, a sense of resolve grew within me. I wouldn't let their betrayal define me. I wouldn't let their actions destroy my life. I would move on, rebuild, find a new path forward. The day I finally signed the papers for the sale of the house was a bittersweet moment. It was the closing of a chapter, the end of an era. I walked through the empty rooms one last time, the echoes of their laughter and conversations fading into the silence. I took a deep breath, a wave of sadness washing over me. But there was also a sense of liberation, a feeling of finally breaking free from the chains of the past. I left the house, the key heavy in my hand. As I turned to walk away, I glanced back one last time. The windows were dark, the curtains drawn. The house looked lifeless, abandoned. It was a fitting end to a story of betrayal and deceit. I moved to a small coastal town, a place where the rhythm of life was dictated by the tides and the cries of seagulls. It was a world away from the hustle and bustle of the city, a place where anonymity was easy to find. I rented a small apartment overlooking the harbor, the constant motion of the boats a soothing balm for my troubled soul. I found a job at a local bookstore, surrounded by the comforting smell of old paper and ink. The work was quiet, undemanding, a welcome respite from the pressures of my previous life. I spent my days shelving books, helping customers find their next literary escape, and losing myself in the stories of others. The days were long, the nights even longer. The silence of my small apartment was often deafening, the absence of Sarah a constant ache in my heart. But slowly, gradually, the pain began to subside. The sharp edges of my anger dulled, replaced by a quiet sadness, a sense of loss that was both profound and liberating. I didn't seek out new friendships, didn't try to fill the void left by my former social circle. I needed time to heal, to rebuild my trust in others, to rediscover who I was outside the context of my marriage and my betrayed friendships. I spent my free time exploring the coastline, hiking through the forests, kayaking in the bay. The natural world offered a solace I hadn't found in human company, a sense of peace and connection that transcended the pain of the past. I started writing, pouring my thoughts and feelings into a journal, the words flowing freely onto the page. It was a cathartic process, a way to make sense of the chaos that had engulfed my life. I wrote about the betrayal, the anger, the grief, but I also wrote about the beauty I found in the natural world, the kindness of strangers, the small moments of joy that punctuated my days. The writing became a lifeline, a way to connect with myself, to find meaning in the midst of the pain. It was a slow, gradual process, but with each word I wrote, I felt a sense of healing, a growing awareness of my own strength and resilience. News from my old life trickled in through mutual acquaintances and the occasional social media post I couldn't resist looking at. It wasn't pretty. The idyllic facade of my former social circle had crumbled completely. Greg, facing financial ruin and a tarnished reputation, had left town, his whereabouts unknown. Lisa, ostracized by her friends and plagued by the rumors I had carefully planted, had retreated into a reclusive existence, her once vibrant social life reduced to a series of solitary evenings. Tom, his career stalled and his confidence shattered, was struggling to maintain his position in the company, his ambition replaced by a gnawing anxiety. And Sarah? She had disappeared completely. Some said she had moved back in with her parents, others that she had left the country. I didn't know, and frankly, I didn't care. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with my life, was gone. In her place was a stranger, a ghost of the past that haunted my memories. The news of their downfall brought no satisfaction, no sense of triumph. Instead, it filled me with a profound sadness, a deep regret for the lives that had been destroyed, the friendships that had been shattered. My revenge, though meticulously planned and executed, had left a bitter taste in my mouth, a lingering sense of emptiness that I couldn't shake. I realized that revenge, though tempting, was a hollow victory. It didn't erase the pain, didn't heal the wounds. It simply created more pain, more suffering, more destruction. The only true path to healing was forgiveness, not of them, but of myself. Forgiveness for the trust one had misplaced, for the love I had wasted, for the life I had lost. I began to let go, to release the anger and resentment that had consumed me for so long. I focused on my new life, on the simple pleasures of my work, on the beauty of the natural world, on the quiet contentment of solitude. The past was gone, the future uncertain. But in the present moment, I found a fragile peace, a sense of hope that had been absent for far too long. Years passed. The coastal town became my home, the salty air and the rhythm of the tides a familiar comfort. I built a quiet life for myself, a life filled with simple pleasures and meaningful connections. I made new friends, people who knew nothing of my past, who accepted me for who I was, not for the role I had played in a long-forgotten drama. I never spoke to any of them again. There were no dramatic confrontations, no tearful reconciliations, no apologies offered or accepted. The silence between us was a vast, unbridgeable gulf, a testament to the depth of the betrayal and the pain it had caused. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howled and the rain lashed against the windows, I would think of them. I would picture them, alone and isolated, haunted by the ghosts of their past actions. I would wonder if they ever thought of me, if they regretted the choices they had made, if they longed for the friendship we had once shared. But the thoughts were fleeting, like shadows that flit across a wall. I had moved on, leaving the past behind. I had found a new life, a new happiness, a new sense of peace. The pain of their betrayal had faded, replaced by a quiet understanding of the complexities of human relationships, the fragility of trust, and the enduring power of forgiveness. I had learned a valuable lesson, a lesson forged in the crucible of betrayal and loss. I had learned that forgiveness was not about condoning the actions of others, but about freeing oneself from the chains of the past. It was about letting go of the anger and resentment, the bitterness and the blame, and embracing the possibility of a new beginning. And so, I lived my life, grateful for the lessons I had learned, the challenges I had overcome, and the strength I had found within myself. The past was a distant memory, a faded photograph in the album of my life. The future was uncertain, but I faced it with a quiet confidence, knowing that I had the resilience to weather any storm, the wisdom to navigate any challenge, and the courage to embrace the unknown.